Chess is a very difficult game. There is no doubt about it. If you think chess is easy, then you're probably not really that good at the game. However, there are principles to follow in chess that will make you be able to know what to think about if you're new to the game. Because let's be honest, when you're new, chess can be very overwhelming. It can be hard to know where to start, what to think about, and how to become good at the game. That is why in this video, I'm gonna give you 5 tips to become better at chess. And this video is aimed for beginners, but I would also say for a lot of intermediate players that are over the beginning phase of playing chess, but that are still struggling to improve and that feel like they are at a sort of plateau. So I think that you can use these tips at pretty much any level. Let's get started. So the first tip, and this is a pretty self-explanatory one, is to follow chess principles. A lot of people think that chess principles are good to know, but I am smarter than the principles, so I am not really gonna follow them. I'm gonna take my own path. You know, I am guilty of this too. I do it all the time. With chess principles, what I mean is, first and foremost, that you should try to take center in the beginning of the game, right? So you should try to, as much as possible, take as much center as you can. 2, you should develop your minor pieces first before you get your queen out, your rooks out, before you go and have fun with these pieces. Your bishops and knights should develop, and then you should castle very early on in the game to make sure that your king is safe. But there are more principles than this. These are the very basic ones, and you know, I could make a video with a million different principles, but some of the ones that I've seen that a lot of people don't do is specifically playing solid. I see a lot of people sometimes getting the feeling of, whatever, I do not need to play solid. Instead, I'm going to play with my gut feeling and just go for this crazy line that I do not know if it works, but I'm gonna have fun. And then all of a sudden, you know, they play this really terrible move, they lose the game, and they think chess is not fun because they lost. So an example is, for instance, in this position, I was playing this game against someone online, and a very big part of me wanted to, first and foremost, just castle and just sacrifice this pawn. We can see that my opponent is right now threatening both to go queen takes f2 and to take this pawn. So I wanted to just castle, give up this pawn, and then just somehow create some sort of crazy attack, like I can show, like this. I wanted to do something crazy like sacrifice my rook, bring up the pawn, get my rook in, and just try to go for something crazy like this, which obviously just doesn't make sense. And obviously I didn't play this. I mean, this would be really terrible. But what I'm trying to say is that because my queen was on h5, my mind was very stuck with the fact that my queen is here to attack this king. So for me, it hurt, it like almost physically hurt to bring back my queen and play queen e2, defending both of these pawns. But obviously this is the best move because we have 2 things that are being attacked. I should just go back and defend these things. So I do not need to go for this super crazy, random, aggressive line that, you know, just loses basically. Some other important principles that are good to know are, for instance, not moving the same piece twice in the opening. I see a lot of people first getting their bishop out and then moving the bishop again, and you've just lost a turn by doing that, so there's no point. But I would say know the basics, castle early, do not play too aggressively, and just try to play solid and try to find the best move in a position instead of just following your gut feeling that is telling you to do something that's just fun, because it's not going to be fun when you lose. The next mistake that I see a lot of people doing is playing chess without a plan. And this is very simple. I mean, if you play a game of chess and you don't really know what's going on, it's very easy to just go back and forth, like move up the queen 1 step, not really knowing why you're doing this, then take the king out. And then 1, the game becomes a lot more boring because you just don't really see the purpose, I think. But 2, you will play really bad moves because there is no greater meaning with your moves. Whilst your opponent is strategizing, is that a word? And is, you know, finding ways of trying to beat you, you're doing absolutely nothing. And that is why there's the saying that a bad plan is better than no plan at all. You need to have something to be striving for. And so one very easy way of fixing this is by learning chess openings, because when you learn chess openings, a lot of times, by knowing how the game starts and knowing what the ideas are in the opening and understanding them, it'll be easier for you to know what your plans are going to be in the middle game, which is the phase after the opening. For instance, this is a Benoni. I am playing the Pawn Storm variation, which sounds pretty fun, which is when you just push up all your pawns. And I know here that ultimately, after I've castled and developed everything, my plan is to go e5. This is what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to push up this pawn, and I want to be able to take a lot of center, and sometimes I want to be able to push this other pawn, get a knight up over here, and then be able to move my knight to any of these squares. And I know this. And because I know this, I am going to play moves that are ultimately going to be in favor of doing this, even though I don't play it immediately. So right now, for instance, I'm waiting a little bit, but at some point I will end up going e5, even though, I'm not doing it immediately. So it's really good to know and understand the stuff that you actually play, and maybe look at games from masters that are playing the same opening as you, because that will give you ideas. And as soon as you have opening ideas, you're going to see that a lot of those ideas are going to transpose to later on in the game as well. So that is a big tip that I wanted to give you. The next mistake I see a lot of people doing is trading the wrong pieces. Now, this is, I think, something that a lot of people don't think about, but it is really, really, really important to understand which pieces you have that are good and which pieces are bad. And what characterizes a good piece from a bad piece is how much good is that piece giving you, right? So, for instance, in this position right here, this knight is my absolutely best knight. Why? Because my opponent only has a light squared bishop, has no dark squared bishop, which means that if I trade this knight, if I get rid of this knight will forever be able to stay in the most central square of the whole board and will not be able to be eliminated by any of my opponent's pieces unless my opponent sacrifices a rook, which is worth more than the knight. And in those endgames, I would be winning. So now, immediately, my plan became to just simply trade this knight. And then this was just an absolutely impeccable piece. But an even easier example to understand is that if you, for instance, place all your pawns on the same square, on the same square color, right? So all of these are on dark squares. Then this bishop right here that I have, this one is going to become pretty good because it's going to be able to navigate through these pawns, right? But this bishop right here, it's going to become completely useless because it's being blocked by a lot of pawns. And so the purpose of a bishop is to be able to take control of long diagonals. It's to be able to, see from a far distance. This bishop is not able to fulfill its purpose. Hence, it would be really good for me to somehow trade this bishop for one of my opponent's pieces. Because in this position, this bishop is really bad. And obviously, this is right out of the opening. But this is really important because the more you understand this, the more you're going to end up getting into endgames with the good pieces, and that can actually make an equal endgame become a winning endgame for you. If you just know which pieces you should trade and which pieces you should keep. That's going to give, and that's also going to make it easier for you to come up with plans throughout the game, because that's going to become a plan in itself. It's not just about a plan of how do I create an attack on my opponent's king? How do I take as much center as possible? No, this becomes a big plan as well. How do I trade my bad pieces for my opponent's good pieces and just get a better position? Because chess is not just about checkmating. Chess is about the whole journey until the win. And your plan cannot just be win or checkmate. You need to have micro plans throughout the whole game because the game changes. The game in the opening might be very closed, where everything you want is to get rid of this bishop, but then later on the position can become very open, which means that the pieces can navigate easier. And all of a sudden, the whole plan might be to create a weakness in your opponent's position, such as getting your opponent to get doubled pawns. and then attacking those double pawns. And so your plan throughout the whole game needs to change. And knowing which pieces to trade or not can be one of the good plans that you have in between. But this is something that's really important to understand, I think. Tip number 4 is to not just think about your own plans, but also think about your opponent's plans. I see a lot of time people just constantly thinking, okay, if I move up this pawn, then I can maybe like do this, and I can like double up my rooks, and then I can prevent this pawn from pushing, and then I can like do all of this, and then all of a sudden, bam, the opponent just comes with a move and they say, oh, I didn't see this coming. And that is because they only see the game from their perspective. But chess is a game for 2 people, so there's constantly a battle of plans, and you're constantly trying to have the better plan and constantly trying to execute your plan in a better way. So something that's really important is that in every position, whenever you are coming up with your plan, you need to think, okay, if this is what I want to do, what is it that my opponent wants to do? What is my opponent threatening right now? And what is their long-term plan? And obviously this becomes easier the better you become at the game. But for instance, in this position, I remember my opponent went knight g5, brought up the knight, and I immediately saw, and I hadn't seen this at first, but I immediately understood, okay, my opponent is right now threatening this pawn. They're trying right now to, first and foremost, take my bishop, which would mean that this pawn, when I take back, would become an isolated pawn. This pawn is hanging, there's a lot of things going on. And so I had to calculate all of this, like how do I deal with this in the best way possible? Because ultimately, I only want to start doing my plans the moment that I know that I have time to do my plans. Because if I have a beautiful plan, but I never have time to do it, what's the point of it being a beautiful plan? So I am always thinking first about what my opponent wants to do, and then I'm thinking about what I want to do. But my plan always needs to be in sync with what my opponent is doing. So here I realized that, okay, I will trade queens. And because right now, I believe that, me getting him being able to take my bishop and me getting this pawn over here, which would not be protected by any other pawn, hence be an isolated pawn. I thought that this would be a huge weakness for me in endgames. So I realized that for me, it is very important, now that my opponent is threatening this, for me, it's very important to not allow him to take my bishop. So I will let him take this pawn, but I will take this pawn. It will basically be a trade of pawns, but more importantly, I will not let him trade this knight for my bishop and give me this isolated pawn. And so I was calculating all of this, and then I immediately saw that after he has to retreat his bishop, I'll be able to get a pretty active rook, and then at some point, I will try to exchange, for instance, this knight for this bishop, which is the defender of this pawn, to later on be able to win this pawn, or at least eliminate the defender of this pawn. So I was thinking about all of these things. I was thinking about how am I able to target this bishop? If I am able to win this pawn, I'll end up being in an endgame a pawn up, which is an endgame that I should be able to at least push for a win in. And so all of these things kind of come together into one huge plan of a game. And yeah, you just realize that everything just comes very intertwined. So, but that is a big tip. Constantly think about what it is that your opponent wants to do. An easier example of this too is from another game. In this position, my opponent really wanted to take back this pawn. Like they really wanted to take it because I was a pawn up right now. So obviously they really want to get back their lost pawn. So they decided to trade rooks, then put the rook on c1. But I just thought, okay, I clearly see that they're just thinking about picking up this pawn. Let me allow them to do that and make a move that will just be kind of a waiting move where my threat is to bring up this rook, because I thought there's no way that they will take this pawn because there's a tactic. But my opponent was so focused in fulfilling their plan that they didn't see that after queen takes pawn, I have this really beautiful tactic, rook check, forcing either this bishop to move back or this rook to take this rook. If this rook captures this rook, then I will win the queen, as the defender of this queen will be gone. And if bishop here, I'll be able to trade queens and then go bishop here, threatening the rook and threatening this bishop. And after the rook moves, I'll be able to take this and it'll be completely winning for me, as I'll be a piece up and I will almost be checkmating my opponent. But my opponent just completely missed it, and I immediately won the game after this move. So these are very important things. Always try to look for your plans and your opponents. Now, lastly, the final tip that I will give you if you want to improve at chess is, apart from doing all of these strategy things that I've told you throughout this whole video, it is very, very, very important, obviously, to become as good as you can at tactics. Because I always say this, in beginner chess, I truly believe that 90% of the games are decided because of tactics. Let it be, for instance, that you blunder a piece. Like, for instance, just like my opponent here, didn't see that I could just push up my pawn and win a piece. And this was a 2100 rated opponent. So I truly believe that tactics are the absolute most important thing. Constantly being able to spot tactics like forks, like pins, etc. Constantly being able to spot when your opponent blunders a piece, and constantly being able to make sure that you do not blunder a piece, that you do not commit these mistakes. And, you know, at higher levels, the tactics become even more difficult, but I win a lot of my games because of tactics. For instance, in this position, you can try to pause the video to see how white wins in the next move. But there's a beautiful move that you can do here that just wins on the spot. And that move is Queen G5, sacrificing the queen. Why? Because if the queen captures my queen, then this rook will be taken and there will be a back rank checkmate. So this just completely wins on the spot. So, you know, this is something that I spotted in a few seconds, and this was against the 2200. So I really think that becoming good at tactics just makes you be able to win a lot more games. And I was basically like preparing for this idea for a lot of moves before. And the thing here is that the queen just really has nowhere to go. The rook cannot go here because then I'll take and go checkmate. The queen cannot move anywhere. All the squares are taken. So there's really nothing that my opponent can do apart from sacrificing a piece. But then, you know, a few moves later, this just became resignation after rook e1, as I just put my rook on an open file, threatening the queen, and I knew that my knight was going to come up over here, and this was just completely lost for my opponent. I hope that these tips help you out a little bit. I talk a lot more about strategy in this video than what I've done in previous, you know, like beginner tips, but I truly think that there's more to chess than just one move tactics. I mean, chess is about plans, chess is about strategy. And when you start to be able to combine tactics with strategy, with understanding all the different parts of the game, obviously studying openings, learning from masters, understanding ideas for the middle game, understanding endgames. When you start to be able to combine all of these things, that's when you become an extremely strong player. This is something that, you know, everybody is constantly learning. Chess is not just one game, but chess is a sum of a lot of different games within it. So thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know if you have any other tips, and let me know if you want to see more educational content. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!